giving everyone a little bit of background about myself. I've been at Human Rights Watch for, well, in my role right now, 8 years, though the relationship goes back about 12 years. I'm the, as Joel said, the senior quantitative analyst, which means that I am responsible for kind of vetting and reviewing when we use data in our reports, pretty much at any level. But so I'm responsible for that, but I'm also responsible for doing data analysis that ends up in our reports. And for that work, I am mostly focused on the US. I'm a US program researcher. So I work most frequently on the US criminal legal system and the US immigration enforcement system, and trying to use data from both of those systems to provide evidence that goes into our reports. The way that that we use data in our reports is almost always to complement and corroborate the information that we are gaining through testimony and through interviews. For those of you who are a little bit less familiar with Human Rights Watch, we're an advocacy organization that uses research to conduct advocacy with local and national governments. And so our bread and butter methodology is really about gathering testimony, doing legal analysis, and really bringing out people's stories. And so our researchers are typically coming from really non-scientific fields. They're lawyers, they're journalists, and so a lot of what we do is kind of falls outside of the realm of, say, I think what a lot of people here and on this call and certainly at the conference work on in the sciences. So it's much more about kind of telling stories and demonstrating what has happened. I'm the first person and kind of the only person who's had my job. We did not have a quantitative person on staff previous to me. And we also have had over the years very few people that have come out of, say, public health or medical schools. At times we have, and other times we haven't. The way that we often work with people coming out of the sciences is through partnerships. Usually a researcher is working in partnership with either a school of public health or economists or others who provide a lot of that expertise that we might be lacking in-house to kind of jointly produce research. So that's kind of a very broad and general overview of my work. I'm very happy to go into details about what I do, a little bit more about my background. I have a PhD in international development, and with that PhD, I did a lot of my work in the School of Public Health. So my background was really in learning about how, in the public health sphere, how surveys are done, how data is collected, basic statistical methods. But I really think in my actual day-to-day work, it's much more akin to data journalism than anything that I was doing, as a public health student. So what that means is we're not typically trying to model and use kind of inferential statistics to kind of get uh, to real kind of causal answers. We're really relying on administrative data and descriptive statistics to kind of tell what has happened and how that links up to the qualitative data of what we know about what has happened, and to use that to kind of build a full, complete picture describing some certain scenario of rights violations. So that's really kind of my day-to-day work. But this topic is really, it's about how career building in the human rights NGO sphere. So I'm happy to kind of talk about that if people have specific questions. And you could ask questions via chat to the room or to Joel, or just go ahead and unmute, I think, too, if anybody has specific questions. If you'd like to see examples of some of our work, both the work that I do on kind of data analysis stuff, but also some of the other work that we do with either geospatial research or some of the partnerships we've done with health researchers or economists, we can I could share some links and we could discuss some of that stuff as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
So it seems like a lot of your work and in your career path, your education and your PhD training was directly applicable to your current projects.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice for people who have research in other kinds of fields? So I'm a cancer researcher, but I am very passionate about using science and data to solve human rights problems and move into that sphere after defending. Do you have any advice for someone trying to build up skill sets or make that jump into the world outside of cancer research?
Right. Yes. I think first and foremost is to really kind of do a lot of reading and research about with organizations that are kind of doing more advocacy-based research, and what that advocacy, how that advocacy research probably is similar and different to the research that you've been doing as a student and as a researcher so far. When we have been working on, say cervical cancer in Alabama, we've been doing research on access. It's really about access to healthcare more than anything. And so kind of the science comes into it through expert interviews with people who are working within public health systems, schools of public health and things like that. And so, so I would say, as you're looking at potential employers, if you're interested in human rights work, there's to look at people who both partner and do active research with a human rights lens. And so on health and things like that, that's quite often about the right to health and access. So if you're interested in it, I think it's about thinking through whether there are spaces in public health institutes or public health schools or NGOs that are focused on expanding healthcare with the framing of the right to health. And through there, you would link up with more traditional human rights organizations that are also trying to expand their work into the right to health. So it's really about a framing kind of thing. don't know really. Really where else to take that question. Yeah.
So I'm currently a master's student who in a science policy program. And I want to eventually do something that's like probably outside of academia, potentially in a nonprofit or an NGO, but still related to science or science policy.
Yeah.
And one thing I've been trying to figure out throughout my academic career is if I'm not going into academia, do I still need to get a PhD? Because it seems like everyone who does this work has a PhD. So is that like a requirement, or they just happen to have them?
I would say no, you don't need to. I think the most valuable thing in the nonprofit sphere, and I think the policy sphere, is really experience. And so I think the question you have to ask yourself is, you kind of a trade-off between gaining additional kind of hands-on experience, building up an expertise and a body of knowledge, and how you would be able to do that going through different paths. My experience has been that there's all kinds of people working in the NGO and policy sphere that do not have PhDs. Certainly at a place like Human Rights Watch, which is, like I said, much more kind of outside of that zone of that zone, there's, I think, only a handful of people who have a PhD. Most people are coming out of it with, well, like I said, law degrees, various other master's degrees. As far as science policy goes, I mean, it might be a totally different world that I'm unfamiliar with. But, I think it depends on ultimate career goals. I think to maybe lead a policy institute at some point, those people probably do have that level of qualification, but certainly not to be, an analyst working on policy papers. I don't think that it's necessary. Okay, I'm seeing some chat questions.
I have a question here.
Sure, go ahead.
Talking about COVID-19,
yeah,
and I'd like to know, what would you answer if a person says, I don't trust science? Because we are facing this situation now.
Yeah. I don't have a good answer for this.
Not a polite one.
Yeah. And, we all might be a little bit in our bubbles a little bit. I'm based in California. And so, the attitudes just in the public here are very different than they are in other parts of the country, other parts of the world. So, I think listen, in human rights work, it's not just about things like COVID-19 or climate change. We're facing all kinds of usually bad actors who say, I don't believe these facts that you're pointing out. And the stance
yes, and been... just a comment here. The thing is that I'm a lawyer, so I understand what we're talking about, because sometimes we just say something and people say, I don't trust you. Mm-hmm. So it's not about data, it's not about evidence.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's going to be some group of people who will never trust you, right? Or will never trust Human Rights Watch, who think everything that, there's an agenda to everything that we put out. I think the overall attitude is that there is still value in, of course, in that facts do exist, that there is a factual reality, that we should follow the facts to where they lead us, and that even though this is a time right now where it seems like, especially in the US government, there's less willingness to accept what we are exposing as real, we need to keep on doing it for posterity, for lots of reasons, to give voice to the people who have trusted in us. And so, I mean, so for us, we need to keep on producing our factual analysis and research. And hopefully the overall kind of trends away from kind of the fact-based reality, lessen. But this is something that's really worrisome, especially when it seems that there's a big, massive divide and totally different realities that different people are experiencing and living and believe in the country and around the world. So I don't know, it's a difficult question. I'm sure if we opened up everyone's mic, we can talk about it all hour.
We have a question from a Darcy Barr. She's wondering if Human Rights Watch offers opportunities for novice researchers or early career scientists, and what kind of programs are out there that you're aware of that could help them.
Yeah. Well, the fact is that opportunities are sadly quite limited as far as opening up new positions, just our general growth. The number of positions we have funds for. As you can imagine, right now is a very difficult time for fundraising. And we're kind of in HRW is not in a growth period, let's just say. But our opportunities for kind of early career researchers are limited to fellowships, of which there's a handful of them that are extremely competitive, but we have annual fellowships. We also, of course, at kind of a very junior level, have internship opportunities, and then we'll occasionally have openings for research staff. I would say that those openings are not, even at kind of a junior level, require you to have some level of expertise, and experience doing that research already in another environment. So there are very few opportunities for somebody to come in without a background for that actual research position to just kind of learn on the job. One of I think the ways that we kind of connect with certainly scientific researchers, like I said, is through partnerships. So that's with kind of partnerships with schools of public health, with more science-based NGOs, with local, meaning kind of state level or even, local think tanks and research institutes who are working on some of the problems that we partner with. And that's kind of how we get going on a research project that would build up, say, human rights / science expertise on a subject that is within the Venn diagram of the two spheres of work.
We also have a question about whether or not you see any unmet needs of any particular data analysis or science-related skills in human rights work, and do you see a place where more data or quantitative analysis could be helpful, but isn't fully being utilized or realized for its potential? And how do you feel generally about access to these tools?
Yeah, I think it depends. It depends a lot on the subject. So one thing that I didn't talk about much in my intro, I kind of jammed through it, was some other spheres of kind of technical / scientific methodology that we use outside of what I personally do kind of on my day-to-day. So we have a small, for example, we have a small team of 4 or 5 people that worked, of which I'm a part of, called the Digital Investigations Lab is the team name. And so it's me who kind of handles data analysis work. We have a open source researcher who is somebody who uses user-generated content, so video and photo evidence found through open source means, so YouTube, the internet, to kind of establish what happened, to recreate scenarios. And then we have a technologist who kind of helps us, who's coming from a computer science background, and helps us do basic things like scrape websites, to information management, and or even like reverse engineering pieces of software, things like this. And then we have 2 geospatial analysts who both were at the UN previously, and who use satellite imagery mostly, but other kinds of, all kinds of geospatial imagery to build up additional evidence of violations. And so for things like geospatial analysis, we have the expertise in-house. For things more like descriptive statistics, data journalism style, I have expertise in the areas where I have expertise. There are all kinds of things that we work on where we are probably leaving lots of, say, data analysis on the table because we don't know what data might exist and how we might use it. We work in 96 countries around the world on all kinds of subjects. So there's all kinds of things that I can't be a data expert in all of these things. So I'm sure that there's our data things that we leave on the table, but even more than that, the expertise that we don't have in-house are really a lot of the statistical expertise beyond the level that I have, real heavy duty statisticians. We don't have that. We don't have economists. We don't have, like I said, we are lacking in the health expertise at the moment. And so when we get into spaces where we want to do some of that work, we meet those needs through, like I said, through partnerships. And I'll just give a couple of examples. We recently, in the summer, we released a report on Brazil, and it's about deforestation in Brazil. We've been working on deforestation in Brazil for a little while. It's obviously a huge issue. But the angle for this particular research was about how tying deforestation to public health impacts. And so we worked with a local Brazilian economist who had access to the health systems data, and modeled the excess hospitalizations due to respiratory symptoms, the excess related to deforestation, basically to particulate matter in the air from smoke. That's an expertise that we had to go outside of our organization to gain. And so that data work combines with our researchers' interview work and investigative work to present a more well-rounded piece of research. Another example would be we partnered with Johns Hopkins Public Health to look at really, like, broadly speaking, access to healthcare in Colombia as it relates to COVID. And there, the research was focused on a region of Colombia, an indigenous region, where all of the data, all of the access, all of the morbidity and mortality data was showing a massive disparity related, geographically and ethnically in this region. And so we needed to pair up with the School of Public Health to both collect and analyze that data. So those are, like, two examples of how we kind of fill the void with partnerships. I see that there's a question about or a statement about the on-call scientists. I am aware of the program because I've been working with Teresa Harris at AAAS for a while, on and off over the years. But I don't think I could do a better job of kind of broadcasting that opportunity amongst our researchers. As I talk about this again, you have to understand that even though we're an organization, there's the work is individualized in a lot of ways. People are kind of working on their teams or even on their own project on their own a lot of the time with input from various parts of the organization, but it's not totally flat. Well, it is flat in the way that everybody's kind of working on their own, but not everybody has access to the same information, and not everybody is working in the same way, and certainly not on the same problems. So people are working in lots of different ways at HRW. So just going back to that question, do I feel like we generally have access to the tools or expertise we need? I think that we find the opportunities to access through partnerships pretty well. Do we have everything that I wish we had in-house? Absolutely not. I wish we had a huge health and human rights team. I wish we had some economists on staff. I wish we had a couple more, I wish we had a statistician on staff. I wish we had some data science people on staff, but we don't. We certainly have a goal to build up my team with some more, at least some more data-oriented staff. But like I said, now is not a great time for fundraising and hiring and growth. But that is the plan, of course. That's our plan for sure. Okay, I see another question in the chat. I'm wondering to what extent you or your team members, which I don't really have any team members, have input on the types of human rights related questions you investigate. Okay, great. And how you see the impact of your work. So, I'm a researcher at the organization. So researchers, but I'm in a unique position where part of I'm overburdened in a way and not able to focus on any one thing. So part of my job is to help the researcher do what they're trying to do. So, someone gets access, and it could be even as basic as someone gets access to a spreadsheet and they don't really know the best way to analyze it. So I am kind of providing a service in that way to the other researchers, but I am also developing my own research at the same time. And like I said, the way that I'm kind of split in the organization, I'm split between half my time just focused on US, where I am the researcher, and then half my time kind of vetting, analyzing, editing, helping out people from other parts of the organization. And so in my time, we have kind of a deeper strategy. What are we focusing on as a team? We have a 12-person US team, and that includes like the management, our comms person, 3 researchers, support staff. And so our kind of strategy is, or broader strategies are developed as a team. And it's up to the researcher to really be the expert to say, okay, I've done all the research. This is where I think we should take it. So we'll take our criminal legal system work in the US. There are innumerable human rights violations and issues in the criminal legal system in the US. We have one criminal justice researcher and myself kind of working in tandem with that person. And so what do we focus on? Well, it takes a lot of strategizing. It takes a lot of thinking through value added. Where do we fit within the broader ecosystem of US domestic criminal legal system actors and reformers and human rights organizations? And so, in previous years and decades, we were working a lot on kind of things that happen to prisoners within prisons, within jails. We've shifted over the years and are kind of shifted much more to what's happening with policing, what's happening, how do we, we want to focus on that kind of front end, day-to-day police interactions as kind of the entrance into the criminal legal system. And so that was really kind of the result of lots of back and forth and talking it through in research and thinking about advocacy opportunities. We want to obviously create the most impact. We want to, like I said, figure out where we fit in. And so that's kind of what's driving the research. It's not so much simply about, everything is geared towards trying to create change through advocacy. So it's really about seeing opportunities and then designing the research around what research is needed to drive that advocacy opportunity forward. How do I see the impact of the work back to human rights? Well, broadly speaking, the impact of the digital investigations team, which is myself and the geospatial people and the open source person, is so far, it's been huge for our work. What all of this evidence adds to the testimony and policy and legal analysis is huge. In some instances, the geospatial work is the smoking gun evidence, it is the picture of what happened. In other cases, we could be researching something where we don't have somebody on the ground, but we can reconstruct what happened through video and photo evidence and combine that with remote interviews to really describe something that others have not been able to describe. The data work is incredibly valuable to show kind of the scope, the widespread nature of a problem. It's incredibly valuable to show how a problem has changed over time, has changed over geography. It's incredibly valuable to show kind of disparities between groups. And a lot of that stuff you can't get simply through the qualitative information. People can say that, but to really prove it, the data is incredibly valuable. So, so the actual kind of impact of this methodology and our broader Human Rights Watch methodology has been, it's been big. It's been big. And it took a long time to get to this place. Like I said, I'm the first person to hold this position. It took a long time to get to this point. A lot of ad hoc consultancies and kind of proving the point over time. Great. Does anyone have any additional questions?
Just curiosity, because I'm from Brazil,
Mhm.
and I'd like to know what was your job here?
My job?
Yes, in Brazil. What did you do here?
Well, so me personally,
No,
I
I mean the institution, the
the
organization.
institution. So you mean like what additional advocacy did they do with this research?
Yes,
Or what,
because
or
you
what
said that you were here, right?
Yeah, so we have a Brazil office. We have
Yeah.
we have 3 staff there, although the researcher who did this deforestation report is
Okay.
not based in Brazil. She's in we have an environment and human rights program. And so, like I said, this particular work was in partnership with a Brazilian think tank, an economist think tank. Our Brazil researcher who focuses on Brazil is much more focused on things like police killings, extrajudicial killings, the more kind of traditional civil and political rights violations than some of the stuff. But I think if you're interested in our Brazil work, there's a really great report that we did, came out maybe a year ago, called Rainforest Mafia, which is about kind of the link between organized crime and deforestation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will look for it.
Yeah. Oh, there's a question. Have I tried starting my own grassroots project? I haven't. Right. I personally haven't. I'm curious if there's kind of some follow-up thinking with that question. I'm certainly in awe of people who are able to do that and self-start and get stuff, off the ground. I just want to mention, just some other organizations that, folks might be interested in thinking through. Of course, like in the NGO world, there's the big NGOs, your Amnesty Internationals, your Human Rights Watches, Physicians for Human Rights. But I'd really, a strong piece of advice is that there's all kinds of local, smaller, nonprofits and NGOs doing just amazing work. One of the big areas in the US, obviously, are immigrants' rights NGOs. And so many people with extremely small staff, or basically grassroots projects, doing just phenomenal work. So for people who are kind of career-minded, as far as your interest in this conversation, I really strongly, advise to look beyond the big players and think about, all kinds of actors within, this activist ecosystem that are, we're all, it's a very broad movement, and we're all working together. And you might work together on a project and then split off and then come back a couple years later on another project. And so just to broaden your kind of search and your thinking beyond your amnesties and your HRWs. There's also, of course, there are quite a few university human rights centers, often out of schools of law, who also are practitioners or doing practical research and advocacy. And then there are a limited number of kind of statistical minded folks. I have in mind like the Human Rights Data Analysis Group, who are really coming from a math and statistics background to solve problems. With the Human Rights Data Analysis Group, they're really focused on kind of using statistical methods to figure out the dark number, the unknown number, the missing data as far as casualties in conflict goes. And then, of course, there are all kinds of people working in academic institutions beyond human rights centers who are doing things that I consider definitely part of the broader movement. I'm thinking about all the computer science folks who are working on fairness, accountability, and transparency in things like, well, any kind of predictive algorithmic work, machine learning work, AI work. Those kind of academic researchers, I think, are producing a lot of the work that, and doing the advocacy that advocates use to push for fairer systems, whether that's systems related to economic and social rights, or systems related to, civil and political rights, say predictive policing algorithms. And of course, those are the people who are pushing Silicon Valley and the tech companies to be better. So, and that's not even the complete sphere of activists, but this is all just to say to think about human rights more broadly within kind of as a broad movement, really, of a lot of different actors at different institutions, all kind of trying to find their value add within a broader movement of advocacy.
I have a question. The application of new and emerging technologies for human rights documentation and for litigation in human rights cases has really started to develop quite a bit, especially in international courts.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering if there's advice or if you know of resources for scientists and for students to about kind of the best practices that are developing in order to ensure that reports and studies, analyses, and anything that could be used as evidence is done in a way that is compatible with legal frameworks.
That is a very complex question to answer. I don't have a great, I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer to you. I mean, I know that, let's take a piece of that and think through something like user-generated videos as a piece of evidence that you want to admit into, say, the ICC or court. I mean, the issue with that stuff is all about kind of both verification of what it is, but also maintaining a metadata trail of, basically a trail of ownership and custody of those videos. So I'm not a great person to answer this question. I'm sorry. I don't have broad advice for this. Darcy.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm currently driving, so I apologize. I don't have a visual, but as you were speaking of the broader human rights movement, mm-hmm. and also drawing attention to some of the smaller NGOs, I am interested in beginning consultancy with smaller NGOs in developing something to help them be more human rights based approach, something that I've been studying at University of London. So my question to you is, do you have any thoughts on this approach? Is this something that Human Rights Watch is strategically following, or is this just something they're mindful of?
Can you elaborate a little bit more?
So the human rights based approach is supposed to be something, from my understanding, is supposed to be more of guiding principles as companies or institutions are approaching the SDGs, so the Sustainable Development Goals. Mm-hmm. And if operationally, as they are conducting whatever it is they're doing, or even in research, if you take a human rights-based approach, it turns the work that they are doing into a more human rights focus.
Mhm.
as we are aware, there's so many disciplines that marry up with human rights.
Mhm.
So currently, right now, as I'm studying, this is a pretty focused topic. And we're asked in most of everything that we're doing and in our responses that we take a human rights-based approach. It can be found on the UN website. It's something that can be researched and looked at there. And I wasn't sure if this was common speak or it was new to me. So I'm looking to see how many NGOs are actually aware of a human rights-based approach. And I wondered if you had any thoughts.
I think that, well, yes, it is. It is a framing by which we kind of look at everything, the human rights impacts of anything. But I don't think, we're not looking at everything that we're looking at using language related to the SDGs and kind of international development / humanitarian organizations. I think we use kind of the language of like a human rights framework and human rights framing, but I think they're one and the same thing. It's really about thinking through equality, thinking through avoiding disparities, thinking through groups, thinking through who might be impacted and what special groups to be aware of, who's marginalized, who's vulnerable. So I feel like we are using a lens that is the same, has the same impact as, a human rights-based approach, but maybe we use slightly different language to describe it. When we're kind of looking critical at whether it's private business or government, we are trying to use a human rights lens, basically, to look at their practices. Who is being affected, who's being left out, that kind of thing. So I think that, in practice, it actually, we are doing things through a human rights-based approach, but that's not kind of in the common vernacular of, our hallway meetings and or our Zoom meetings, I should say, and our just how we talk about stuff. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, actually. So thank you.
Yeah.